Yeah, again, I think if you're looking to read for entertainment purposes, but also in stories that are grounded in reality and some really cool things that are going on, then my stories are ripped from the headlines, and you kind of get the behind the scenes look at the way things work. Even in Homecoming Queen, it's how a lot of the things work in those particular areas. And so you're going to learn something without being, spoken down to or, forcefully taught or spoon fed. And I really, my goal is to have readers that will pick up my books and have a really hard time putting them down. So if that's you, and you like fast-paced thrillers with good characters and kind of a realistic grounding, then my book is probably going to be for you. So I hope you check it out.
Everybody, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter, the author podcast, where we bring amazing authors on from around the world to talk about their journey as an author, and you get to meet some great new authors that you can read some great books from and subscribe to and follow their journey. And Chad's here joining us today. Excited. We've just chatted a little bit of baseball, a little bit of Savannah Bananas, which is fun. And we're going to jump into our conversation today. Chad, welcome to Living the Next Chapter.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Excellent. Good to have you here. Chad, tell everybody where you are in this big world of ours.
I am in the state of Virginia in the United States of America on the East Coast, James River.
Beautiful. Excellent. You born and raised there?
Born and raised in Corpus Christi, Texas. So a little bit more than a 7-iron from the Mexican-American border, but that's home.
It's an interesting way to measure that. Okay. All right. That's good. That's a good visual. I like that. You're an author. You can tell you like to use words. That's a good job. Excellent. Tell us a little bit about your author journey, Chad. How did you end up on Living the Next Chapter? Probably the best podcast ever.
No doubt.
How did you end up here?
So, I think I started with just falling in love with creative writing in school, and I had a really good, as many of us did who write, had a very good creative writing teacher early on who just really encouraged us to take all the shackles off, and probably in ways that the administration there didn't like too much, but boy did we take advantage of it and push the limits, and he was so encouraging. And to this day, I give him some props for that. And then, going through law school, I'm a lawyer by trade. You learn the discipline behind writing. You certainly do not learn creative writing like you should, and it took me a while to figure that out. But just the discipline of writing. And then, really long story short, I ended up at the Department of Justice. I was hired there the night before the September 11 attacks on this country. And I was just mesmerized by the energy in the District of Columbia, all that was going on. I was wrapped right up in it, working with the Bureau and DOJ. And that really got me encouraged to start writing about what I was seeing. And then that quickly evolved into creative writing and fiction. And I found a hidden 8th floor, at least hidden to most, at the main Justice Department, which is still there. Had a custodian take me up one afternoon, and it used to be the old FBI ballistic lab. And I said, that's where my story needs to take place. And from that point, the rest is history.
So you go to a secret location in a building that not a lot of people know about, this room, this floor, and you're walking around. Kind of take us in there, like if we could sneak in behind you in the door before it shuts.
Let's do it.
What does it feel? What does it feel like? What did you see? What do you experience?
So I'm 28 years old, and I love the building itself. So the main Justice Building, it's right across from the FBI building. So a lot of your viewers have probably visited DC, and the FBI building is the big draw. It's the ugly building. The building across the street is actually the pretty building, but nobody gets to go in the pretty building unless you work there or you're a guest or you're in trouble. And I was a brand new lawyer there, and I noticed that the elevator had 7 floors, but there were eight windows going up. Mm-hmm. And so I just asked questions, and nobody could answer my questions as to what that floor was. And then there was one person who was kind of the historian behind the building, and he was telling me it used to be the FBI ballistics lab before the Hoover building was built. And so I had to figure out how to get up there. So the way you get up there is you go to the seventh floor through the elevator or the stairs, and then there's a hidden staircase that is right next to the place where it's the media room. So whenever the Attorney General of the United States, no matter what administration gets up and announces a big indictment or whatever, and you see the Department of Justice sign, that's on the seventh floor of the building. Right next to that is that hidden staircase, and it takes you up to a locked door, and the locked door takes you into this eighth floor, this hidden eighth floor, which is almost like a disjointed Olympic track. It goes all the way around the building. The windows are treated because after the Federal Murrah building that Timothy McVeigh blew up back, in 1993, 95, something, they figured out that the shards of the glass were actually like daggers that actually injured more people. So all the federal buildings now have this treated glass. So it's a little hard to see out of, but you can look down and you can see people walking and they don't even know you're there in that building. But it looks like an old garage now. It's got all the equipment. They've got the machinery that's running up there. They have chains that are hanging down. It's kind of macabre. And you almost have to have a flashlight to walk through it without getting hurt.
Now, when you're standing there, walking around there, are you thinking from an author perspective at that point in your life, or like
Yes.
how did that all timing wise happen for you?
So I wish I had them with me if I would have known. I still have the notes that I was taking in a little notepad walking around
Really?
because I knew I would probably never get the opportunity to return to the floor. And I still have the notes, and a lot of the words that I wrote down made it into Scavenger Hunt, which was my first novel.
Wow. Are you kind of like a history buff around what was happening in that room back in the day? Did you know about that space at all?
I am a history buff. Again, at age 28, I did not know much of the history of the Department of Justice or the FBI. I know a lot more now, not only because I'm an author, but because I lived it. But yeah, a lot of what happens at the department is the history of the country's history. So I certainly knew, all of the things that came out of that. When you talk about Robert F. Kennedy, the building had just been named after RFK. That was at the time, Bush 43 was our president, and he had made a deal with Ted Kennedy, who was the Lion of the Senate, on education. They had made No Child Left Behind. They had made an agreement on how they were going to have policy set within the Department of Education. And in return for that, Ted Kennedy wanted his brother's name on the building. And so it became the R.F. Kennedy Main Justice Building. It's still that today. And of course, RFK was a 35-year-old. Speaking of history, he was the youngest at the time, maybe still so, Attorney General, 35 years old, and played a really significant role in the country's history during, all of the Bay of Pigs and other things, mafia that were going on around 1960.
How has your career shaped your author journey? What's the connection?
So I've got two books published. One hopefully will be published by the end of the year. And my goal, and I didn't set out this way, but my goal is to be, the premier novelist for Department of Justice matters. Everything that interests me somehow has a connection to the Justice Department, and now, for better or worse, it's always in the news. And but the breadth and depth of what that agency does permeates everything that interests me. Even like special operations, they have a role in that. They have a role in immigration, have a role in organized crime, they have a role in, cyber, anything that interests me as it relates to thriller content and subject matter can be grounded in the Department of Justice in some way. So my main character is Blake Hudson, and he is a counselor to the Attorney General, and then has to move on over time. But that's the connection.
What do you have in common with your main character? A leading question. I'm leading the witness. I know.
Yeah, I would just first say that I'm not Blake Hudson, although that some people who read the book would think that I tried to be. Blake is much smarter than me. He's much more handsome than I am. And seems to get into a lot more trouble than I would ever get into. But yeah, we were both young lawyers who had an opportunity to work for the Attorney General of the United States at a pretty important time in our country's history, and had to deal with some pretty exciting things. And I've basically taken some of the things that I've saw and made them into a lot more precarious situation for him, and try to put him in a box that nobody else could escape and see if he can get out. And then it's always fun for me to watch how he does it.
When did you discover your love of writing?
Again, I think it was when I realized that I wasn't that good at math or science.
Yeah.
I had to have a love affair with some subject, and it wasn't going to be those other two. I think my mom wanted me to be a doctor, but that wasn't in my DNA. And so I realized that I probably was going to be a lawyer, or I wanted to be. And then I realized that if I was going to be a lawyer and really master my craft, then the most important way to communicate with the decision makers, whether they be judges, whether they be jury members, whether they be administrative officials, you name it, whoever makes the decision, most of the effective communication occurs through the vehicle of writing. And you obviously have your oral advocacy, you have, oral arguments and those things, but those are rare. It's nice to be good at both, but if you're not good at writing, then you're not going to be an effective advocate for your client, whoever that may be, whether it's the government or a corporation now for me. But in any event, the when you really look at the good writers, and I get to work with a lot of great writers. I'm not a Supreme Court clerk myself, but I work with a lot of folks that have clerked for Supreme Court justices. And they are amazing writers. I mean, they are the top of the spear in terms of what they do and how they do it. And I used to try to mimic how they wrote. They're so good that they take the kind of archaic writing style of pretty good lawyers and they turn it almost into a novel. I mean, you read an opening statement from a very good advocate, and particularly Supreme Court advocates, and they're telling you a story, and it's a very creatively woven story. And then so that gives you more confidence to kind of be that creative writer, even in your profession.
It's interesting because you think in a legal sense, everything's fact-based, everything is just cut and dry, clear, black and white. The idea of a story kind of in that mix, I would think that'd be difficult to tell a meaningful story, but I think people would connect with a story over just a list of facts and dates and figures, right?
You're so right, and we are trained in law school that, and then beyond law school as trial advocates, or people who are standing up in front of a jury, for instance. Your opening statement, they always tell you that should be a story. So a lot of times, whether you're watching Perry Mason or whether you're going down to the local, courthouse, you will have the plaintiff's lawyer, the defense lawyer stand up as a part of opening, and they say, this is a story about corporate corruption. This is a story about somebody not paying attention. And then they're telling a story. But for whatever reason, I think lawyers are reluctant to tell a story in their briefs, and the really good ones can get away with it.
When you see your role depicted on the big screen or the small screen, are there any shows or things that come to mind where you're like watching this going, actually, that's pretty close. They're getting really close to what I do and how I kind of approach my career in comparison to some others that are just completely Hollywood. But you watch them and you go, I resonate with what I'm seeing on the screen. Does any of those stand out for you?
I hate to say it, but no.
Really? Okay. All right.
I mean, the ones that I really like are not close. Like, I'd really like A Few Good Men. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've watched that show. I love the trial scenes in that show. It's, it's well done, but it's not believable. And there are some that are like Law and Order are, they are probably, unfortunately, those are probably the closest to reality because it's really not that sexy. Yeah. And so the stuff that you see inside the court, the really good lawyers that are working inside the court, the stuff that they do is probably not sexy enough to sell in TV. And so I think that's probably what it is. Now, there are some books that get it right. I mean, John Grisham's actually pretty good in how he presents. And there are several others that focus, particularly lawyers that have written that can focus on, I would call it the blocking and tackling of getting stuff done. But Dave, it's so mechanical that it really does take a little bit of the romance outside of it, if you will, or away from it, because it's showing people things. The true craftsmanship in good, effective trial advocacy is a smooth, somebody who can smoothly go and get evidence presented, object when he or she needs to, respond to the objections when he or she needs to, and then at the same time have so much confidence and experience in what he or she is doing that they're still focused on the jury and how the jury is receiving what they're saying, as opposed to what do I have to do next to get this evidence in? What do I have to do if he or she objects? What's going to be the good ones, it just comes naturally. And a lot of that's experience.
So you talk about kind of keeping your eye on the jury as things are proceeding. That's reading the room, really. Comedians do it, musicians do it. How does reading the room help you to write so that you can read your audience?
Yeah, so for me, my role actually no longer is in the courtroom. As a chief legal officer of a Fortune 500 publicly traded company, I now have 3 audiences. Wow. One of them is my board of directors, one of them is my senior team, including the CEO, and the other is my law department, which for me is 50 people. And so those are my audiences, and I have to make sure that I'm managing each of those correctly. That's more of a boardroom kind of. So that now let's take it more into the politics and the drama behind the scenes. So more like Suits.
Okay. Yeah.
That's a law firm. That's a law firm context rather than a corporate context. But that's more akin to what I'm dealing with, is that kind of drama behind the scenes.
Okay. All right. I'm wondering if in your opinion, does Hollywood kind of taint readers where they have this vision of what it's like to be a lawyer and be in that situation? And does that do you have to fight against that as you write a book to kind of make it more realistic and more true to what really happens? Are you kind of wrestling with the Hollywood version of what you do and what lawyers do?
I hadn't thought about that before. The thing I'll get back to that, but the thing I wrestle with most is how much, so I have different audiences of my books, and I'm dealing with this in Mob Justice, which will be my 3rd book. And it is the question of how realistic do I need to be to hold certain readers, but also understand that this is fiction.
Yeah.
And so, for instance, I have beta readers that read my book. The book I'm working on and just finished is an organized crime mafia related. There is wiretapping in this book. I know just enough, or I did know just enough about wiretapping to be dangerous. So I sought out the experts, and they took me through how it works, mechanically, the language, the policy, the best practices, all of this. And it was fantastic. And then they read my book and they said, there was a couple of things that happened, and they said, a prosecutor would never do that. And they almost were angered by it because and I said, I understand. And it's like, no, that just would never happen. They would never accept that. That could never happen. And I said, okay, well, hold on a second with that. And then I take it to my editor who's, does a lot of thrillers. And he said, they need to understand this is fiction. You can't, if it's going to be talking about their world, nobody's going to buy your books. There's got to be some things that are a little bit of a stretch. So that's the line that I'm normally dancing with. The Hollywood taint is less affects my books, because what's going on there, I mean, whether you're watching Reacher or you're watching Mission Impossible or where you're watching, all of the, the Jason Bourne, those are actually kind of in line with the way I want to write my book. And so if anything, they give me a little space. They give me a little space to go beyond kind of the boring part of what's real. And so I kind of like that. I will just say, not for today's podcast, but there's a whole podcast you could do on how Hollywood taints juries in the real life
Right.
litigation event. They expect to see all of this evidence, that forensic evidence, for instance, that does not exist, and that's a really big challenge for prosecutors and for defense lawyers.
Yeah, this whole based on a true story kind of approach to how we consume true crime is huge in podcasting, all of this, right? I feel like we're kind of being pulled away from maybe some of the what we consider boring facts, but the reason they're facts. And this is kind of what we should be basing judgment on, not a
Yeah.
kind of glorified version of it. Interesting. Yeah. I never actually, while we're chatting, I didn't really put those together myself, but I can see how you might be swayed to going, well, this isn't exciting enough. This can't be real. No, this is actually how this works. No, I like that. One of the shows my wife loves is Lincoln Lawyer. The one thing I love about it is just how it seems like when I watch any type of legal thriller, how everybody just seems to be one step ahead of each other, and nobody seems surprised in the moment where they're like, "Well, how about this?" And you're like, "Yeah, I know about that." And I'm like, I don't know how. It's like a big game of chess happening in real time in front of you, and you get to see this kind of happen. And it just seems like, for the most part, when you watch on television, movies, nobody seems really surprised, right, as they sit behind those desks because they're, defending or prosecuting. Just everybody just seems so cool and like they just know where they're going next. I don't know. I don't live like that, so I'm living vicariously in that situation.
Yeah. I get the opportunity to work with some of the best lawyers in the entire world because, what we do is so important as a company. We build things that protect freedom around the world, and so I get the opportunity to hire and to watch some of the best lawyers, and even the best lawyers don't have those kind of days very often. So
How does writing balance you compared to what you do in your day to day? What does writing do for you?
yeah, so it balances me out is the short answer. Like I have a pretty good life, but being in the spot that I'm in, I kind of have I get to see the dark underbelly of humanity from time to time, quite often actually. So there is kind of a therapeutic value to me writing. It allows me to I don't want to say that it's escapism, but it almost is kind of like living in a parallel universe where I can still be a part of a story that is constantly keeping my mind moving, and it kind of takes me away when I want to be taken away from some of the things that the daily grind brings to it. And so I'm usually pretty consistent, unless I'm really swamped. I'm going to get up early before my real day begins, and I'm going to start, trying to get something on the computer to move a book along, and that usually gives me a sense of accomplishment before I even get started in the day. So that's another thing is I feel like I'm getting something done. I don't watch a whole lot of TV outside of baseball or movies.
Yeah.
I'm not a Netflix binger. And so when I do find myself binging on something, whether it's sports or, when I do fall into that Netflix binge from time to time, I feel a little guilty about wasting my time. So the writing helps me say that I got something accomplished with my free time.
Okay. So for the readers, again, kind of give us an overview. What can we anticipate from you as an author? Who's your ideal reader? I really want to make that connection really evident for us.
Yeah, so you can expect probably a book every 18 months from me. It's going to be thriller related. I have, a spy thriller that I started off with called Scavenger Hunt. And it's got a lot of people that wanted a sequel to that. So while I was writing my second book, which is Homecoming Queen, which is off-brand, also a thriller, but not a spy thriller, I got calls to keep writing about Scavenger Hunt. So I think moving forward, although I love my second book, it may be the best book I'll ever write. My goal is to have a Scavenger Hunt series from this point forward. Again, every 18 months, My readers should be those that want to be entertained and not preached to. My goal is never like you are going to get politics in my book. You're not going to get my politics. It's just politics is a part of the world. So my characters have to struggle with both sides. What I try to do is to give my reader a behind the scenes look, almost like what we did earlier with the eighth floor, a behind the scenes look that is honest, but where my characters have to deal with what real life people have to deal with, but it's not the way you see it on MSNBC or Fox News. It's how that person would have to make the decision in a real life situation. So my books tend to be nonstop action. Character development is premium for me. If you don't like my characters, then I've failed. And if my book is not entertaining to you because I felt like I needed to teach you a lesson, then I've also failed. That is not my goal. Now, I hope that you learn something about my world as you read my books, and I hope that that will be interesting to you. But that's not the main goal.
So what was the thing that caused you to chase after Homecoming Queen, and how, like, if you kind of feel like you're on one path and now it seems like you're on two paths, what was the break there?
Yeah, so I don't think it was ever a break. It was I had 5 stories in my head, and they were all going to be their own stories.
Okay.
And then what I realized was, quite frankly, I could take the characters in Scavenger Hunt and continue with all the stories that I would want for those other ones. Homecoming Queen is a love song to my hometown, Corpus Christi, Texas, which is one of the most fascinating areas, I think, in the entire world in terms of a true melting pot of all of these huge personalities from all these different cultures. And that was a book that I had to write. The story was just, it wouldn't leave me. And I just knew that had to be book number 2. So I'm very glad to get it out there. And the reviews have been very good. And the things that the great thing is I had some beta readers for that book who completely saved me from myself and turned what were weaknesses in my book into the strengths of my book. And so now I'm like more wedded to beta readers than I ever have been before, and making sure that I pick the right ones.
So what was one of those examples that you heard back from one of your readers then?
So my protagonist in Homecoming Queen is Annika Raven, a young woman in her early 20s. But before it went to print, it was Maya Molina. And I have a great friend that I grew up with who's from Mexico City, and now she's an executive at Warner Brothers and deals in the space. And she read it, and she said, Chad, you can get away with writing about a woman, but you can't get away with writing about a Latina. And I said, well, hold on a second. Why is that? And she's like, well, you have her eating breakfast burritos. And I said, well, I eat breakfast burritos every morning. And she said, you'll never get away with it. I'm just telling you, like, I know your heart. Not everybody's going to know your heart. So if you can change it, I strongly recommend you change it. So I did. And so that was very helpful, because she just said there are going to be groups that are going to come after you no matter what, because they're just going to, for right or wrong. She just said that's the way it's going to happen. So that was great. And then I had another woman who's an actress in LA. And she read it, and she said, I don't like Annika. And I said, why? And she said, she's mean. And I said, well, but she's a victim and she's overcoming. She's like, no, you need to soften her up a little bit. And so I did, without taking away like the thrust of her character. And most of the good reviews that I get on Homecoming Queen, they're espousing the fact that how much they love Annika Raven and what a great woman she is. So those 2 things were key to making the book successful. So 2 examples.
So what is the common thread between Scavenger Hunt and Homecoming Queen?
Just hold on tight thriller.
Okay.
I would we call Homecoming Queen a small town political thriller because the politics of the town kind of take over. But it's really just pure thriller. People may like one more than the other, but people who love thrillers are going to like them both. And
then, so Scavenger Hunt, can you give us a little bit more about the story behind that with Blake? What are we going to experience to kind of draw us in for the first time reading?
So Blake Hudson is the protagonist who has just joined the Department of Justice. He works for the Attorney General in one of the best roles you can have as a young lawyer. And there's been terrorist attacks that have happened all over the country. And so he gets pulled into a clandestine group whose purpose is to overcome bureaucratic hurdles to combat terrorism. You can only imagine what happens. And it's a group composed of Blake from DOJ, an amazing covert, a shadow from NSA. You have a CIA operative as well, and then somebody from Delta Force. And they all come together, and they all have these different ways that they do their thing. And Blake gets called up in this maelstrom, and he starts out being, the way we describe it is, he starts out being the hunter, and then something happens to this group, and he all of a sudden becomes the hunted. And so people are chasing after him, trying to kill him in DC and elsewhere.
So fast moving, quick pace for the reader.
Yeah, it's all my books are fast.
Yeah, there you go.
I have a very small attention span, so if you're not turning the page after every chapter and hoping, like trying to find out what happened, then again, I failed to do my job. But the feedback is that I did not fail.
Tell me about the cadence for how you're going to be releasing your books. How did you settle upon that? Is it just based on the length of time takes you to write? Like, how did you settle on that?
It's my publishing company does not like me to do more than one a year, and I found out that for me it's just that I'm never going to be paying my bills with my books, and so I'm not going to add. I already have enough pressure on my life, and I don't need to add to it. And so my cadence just kind of found itself. I write a book probably 9 months, and then it takes a little bit of time to get everybody else working on it. And then, I want to be strategic when we publish it. I want to make sure that the rollout is exactly the way I want it. So, so at this point, book 3, moving into book 4, 18 months is just right for me.
Okay. All
Retire, maybe I'll speed it up a little bit, but right now I've got plenty to do.
You're way too young to be talking about retirement. What are you talking about? Wow. Well, it's nice. What I love about authors who find their voice is the creativity that just keeps to kind of snowball. One book turns into the next one, turns into the next one, and the story just kind of leads you over time. Do you feel like a passenger as the author, or do you feel like you're the driver?
Yeah, both.
Okay.
Because I feel like I am the driver at the beginning, and then for me, because I live in a world of compliance and rules and regulations. My company is probably the most we do nuclear and all military. Also, we're probably one of the most regulated companies in the world. One of the things that I love about writing is I don't have those. Maybe I should have said this earlier when you asked the question. I don't have those restrictions on writing. I can do anything I want, up until kind of it's time to turn it over to the publisher. But, it's there's a freedom there, and so I think that but in order for me to maintain sanity, I have to have some scaffolding, and I have to have some discipline around how I do it. So I usually think 2,000 words a chapter, 50 chapters. I'll go ahead and do my outline at the very beginning. It'll be destroyed by chapter 20. My characters will take over. So that's when I lose, I'm now in control. When I get to about chapter 20, I have characters that are almost fully developed, and then I'm just throwing adversity at them, and they can only respond in certain ways after I've already developed them. But I don't know, I haven't figured that out yet. And so, yeah, they kind of take over a life of their own, and they surprise me, and they always surprise me in ways that make the story better. So that's the fun part.
And how do you filter yourself in there and your knowledge, your expertise, your background? What kind of things do you add to the story from your own lived experience in your career?
So most of the things that I'm writing about, I don't have to do a lot of research because I have lived them, and I do live. I gave you one example where I have to bury into the wiretapping for me was enough danger. But that's one where I really enjoyed getting expertise on. I like to go to the sites where my book happens. So my next book's going to be in Chicago. I spent a lot of time in Chicago. I think I told you before I got kicked out of City Hall in Chicago on a Saturday because I needed to find out. They have these hidden tunnels under Chicago that have been there since the early 1900s, and the mafia used them. But there's now only one elevator that gets to the tunnels, and that elevator is in City Hall in Chicago. and I was going to a Pearl Jam concert in Chicago last year, and then I was going to go on Friday to City Hall, but then I got invited to a golf tournament, and so I thought it might be open on Saturday. It was not, and so there was a justice of the peace that was letting in these people that were getting married in the back, and they were all dressed up, and I think I had a shirt on that said "Work hard or nobody cares," and I slipped in and made my way to the front of City Hall, and I had a security guard, and she was none too happy with me, and I had to beg her to let me to point out where the elevators were just so I could see it, and then she all but put cuffs on me, kicked me out. So I had a lot of that in Chicago. They don't like people sniffing around, and but particularly when the place is closed, I get it. But I got asked to leave, because I had my camera out, and they don't appreciate that. Some of them do. Tip them sometimes, and they'll let you see more than you should.
Come on,
that's a lot of
it's research. Come on, it's research. Let me come in, right? Yeah,
Right.
I like this. All right, Chad. So when is book 3 available then?
Should be end of the year. We'll have it out
Okay.
by the end of the year. Called Mob Justice. Again, a sequel to Scavenger Hunt, and a lot of people will be reading it. I hope some public officials will be reading it and talk about it. We'll see.
What about the mob reading it? Any problems there?
Oh, so yeah, well, that could be some problems. I have enhanced security, and I probably need to, submit an olive branch. No, I mean, I reconstituted the North Side Gang. It's extinct there in Chicago. The Chicago outfit is still alive and well, but it's more of a legit business operation than it used to be. That's not saying that it's a legit business, but it's more than it used to be. And one of my characters in there is a consigliere for the Chicago outfit called Enzo Renzi, and Enzo is a very, very likable, good character. The other thing I like to do in my books is I like for the reader to struggle a little bit with the bad guys or the bad girls, right? As they're compelling people that we usually give them their side of the story in full, and so some of them are pure evil. Others are a little harder to hate.
Okay.
Enzo's one of those.
All right.
There will be some people that are probably rooting for Enzo to succeed, and we'll see if he does.
See, no, that's a good hook. I like that, Chad. You're definitely good at this. I like it. Yeah. So let's share your website, Chad, where we're going to send everybody to connect with you. I really appreciate you making time to do this with me today. Where should we go, and what are we going to find when we get there?
Yeah, so if you just go to it's www.chadboudreaux, so CHAD, and then my last name BOUDREAUX.com, and you can pull that up. If it's harder to spell, you can pull it up on Google. It'll take you right to my website, and on my website you'll find some video trailers for my 2 books. You'll find some photos that are kind of fun. There's a newsletter you can sign up for to keep up to date what we're doing, and I've started doing a blog of sorts where I kind of extend some of the material in my book. So for between Scavenger Hunt and Mob Justice, I've created in my latest blog post on the site some pretty good narrative and a story there that some of my readers will enjoy, and it's a good way to keep up with us. And then you can also order my books there from wherever you'd like. I've got a link there to Amazon and to Barnes and Noble, but you can get my book wherever you'd like.
Excellent. Are you enjoying Substack as a writer?
I am. I'm just getting warmed up to it.
Yeah.
And it kind of comes with a lot of material there. There's a lot to focus on. So I'm going to have to figure out a way to digest it. But yeah, I'm very excited about the platform.
Yeah, it's great for authors, I think. So many authors come on my show, and they're really starting to dive into Substack. So yeah, I've already subscribed, so you got me there. So that works. Yeah, so Chad, for anybody that's listening, they're interested in this book. Your kind of your closing thoughts, your love letter as an author to readers. What would you like them to know that we haven't covered today that would really seal the deal for them to come and invest in your books?
Yeah, again, I think if you're looking to read for entertainment purposes, but also in stories that are grounded in reality and some really cool things that are going on, then my stories are ripped from the headlines, and you kind of get the behind the scenes look at the way things work. Even in Homecoming Queen, it's how a lot of the things work in those particular areas. And so you're going to learn something without being, spoken down to or, forcefully taught or spoon fed. And I really, my goal is to have readers that will pick up my books and have a really hard time putting them down. So if that's you, and you like fast-paced thrillers with good characters and kind of a realistic grounding, then my book is probably going to be for you. So I hope you check it out.
Excellent. Chad, thank you so much for doing this. We'll have links for everything in the show notes. Everyone go subscribe to the Substack and get more information and follow Chad's journey. And we'll keep watching your website for updates on the next thing. If you are available, Chad, I'd love to have you come back in the future and celebrate upcoming releases as well. Please keep us in mind. I'd love to kind of keep our tabs on you. You're a very interesting person to talk to with a very interesting background. So thank you so much, Chad, for doing this.
Appreciate you. Thank you all.
Hey, thanks for listening to the podcast. Glad to have you here. I just want to let you know that you can always find out what we're doing live in the moment by going to our YouTube channel. Head over to livingthenextchapter.com. There'll be a link right there. Head over to our YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, do all the things that all the YouTubers love to say. And in our YouTube channel, a couple things. You're going to get advanced listens. You're going to get the episodes that we're working on in real time. So we record and post daily on our YouTube channel. I'd love for you to give us a follow over there. As well, we're making playlists. We have over 500 episodes. So finding the right episode for you, we're trying to group things into playlists. So if you like children's books, if you like business, you like historical fiction, we're grouping our authors together to make it a little easier for you to find your favorite next author. So head over to livingthenextchapter.com. And again, I'd love to hear from you. Hearing from the listeners of the show is great. And I just want to say thank you for being a part of the podcast family. And I look forward to having you back for the next episode. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate your time and your listen. Take care.